and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Maybe it's noon where you are. It's early here on the West Coast in the Pacific time zone. I'm delighted to be here to share my time, volunteer my time to tell you a few things about translation and interpretation as a career and what it takes. So I have only a few slides prepared. The idea is that you ask me any question that you want. It's an AMA session, Ask Me Anything. And I'm just delighted to be part of this here. I think the American Translators Association, of which NCATA is, of course, a chapter, does an amazing job at educating future translators and interpreters. And I'm also delighted to volunteer my time for the ATA as one of their spokespersons, which means I talk to the media and I spend an awful lot of time explaining the difference between translation and interpreting to journalists. If I did this full time, I could do it all day, every day, and people would still not get it right. But I know all of you will certainly get it right because you're either looking to get into this profession or you already started in this profession. So that's my little intro. Let's get started. The future, well, nobody knows what the future will bring. The future is uncertain. Maybe you're thinking about getting into the sector, into the business or the profession now. Maybe you're already in it. And I'd love for you to know if you could type into the chat box if you want to be an interpreter or a translator or both. No wrong, right answers, of course. I'd just love to know what everybody's interested in. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few seconds to type that into the chat box, that would be lovely. And Jennifer's going to give me a quick overview because I'm not checking the chat box just to make sure everything runs smoothly. So take a few seconds if you would.
All right. So far we have both, but we have also just translators.
Got it. Future translators. Excellent. Welcome. So the
Lots of
written
people
side of things,
considering both.
considering
We have
both.
one interpreter.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Excellent. So a good mix. That's what it usually is. Usually, when I ask the question, it skews a little bit more towards translation in general. And both markets are strong, but they require very, very different skills. And I'll touch upon that a little bit. The future, as you know, Back to the Future, is uncertain. I don't know if you saw the pandemic coming, but I certainly didn't. My graphic designer didn't see it coming either. I hired her to make this design, and she put it on a mug for me as well as a Christmas present. I highly recommend this designer, by the way. I first started thinking about the future in about 2018 when I started working on a presentation about the future of translation and interpreting that I gave in Brazil at the adivce conference in 2019, which I don't know about you, but that sounds like a lifetime ago, 2019 in the summer. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the future, how it will affect our profession, how work will be affected in general. But I think I was on top of many trends and many things that are happening right now, but I certainly couldn't have predicted the pandemic, and probably neither of you did either. And so my point here is that the future, we don't know exactly what it will bring, but if you want to get into the profession, or if you want to continue in this profession, it's really important that you follow the developments, that you see what the trends are, that you're aware of where things are going. And all this is easily available online. You just have to make that part of your job. So I wanted to mention a few threats that I see for both translation and interpreting. And I think it's important food for thought for those of you who are studying translation and interpreting, because I think it's our ethical obligation as practitioners in the field to tell you what you're getting into, right? Instead of sugarcoating it and saying everything is great. And everything is great, but there are some threats, just like in every profession. Machine translation, MT, is one of them. I've worked as a translator for a very long time. And about 15 years ago, on Friday afternoons when I was an in-house translator, we would play around with what was called Babelfish back then, which was a first version of machine translation. And it was really, really bad. And we'd have a good laugh on Friday afternoons, and then we'd go over to happy hour at the bar next door, and we'd think, oh, our jobs are safe. This machine translation is ridiculous. It can't understand language. Well, a lot has changed in 15 years. If you look at machine translation engines such as Deep, and then the letter L out of Germany, very impressive work in certain language combinations. So is it a threat? Absolutely. Will it also maybe increase the amount of work that's available in one way or another to linguists? Maybe not in translation, but in editing? Perhaps, yes, I think that's true as well. Artificial intelligence affects every profession across the globe. Will we need lawyers? Will we need doctors in 15, 20 years? Nobody really knows the answer to that question, but artificial intelligence is making very big changes in all professions. It may even affect interpreting. For those of you who followed, so this machine interpreting, which really is speech to text conversion, then machine translation, and then again text to speech conversion. Many big tech companies have taken a shot at it. They call it automatic translator or automatic interpreting services. It's all kind of misleading because really it's really machine translation and speech to text conversion. So I think interpreting is much safer in terms of technology replacing us. Bill Wood, who was a very famous interpreting technology guru, who recently passed away, he always used to say that interpreters won't be replaced by technology. Rather, they will be replaced by interpreters who do use technology. And I think that's a really good point. So technology will keep on playing a good, an important and pivotal role in our professions. So yes, work is changing, and the pandemic has changed a lot of ways we do work. Not on the translation side, pretty much at all, because that's pretty much always been remote. But on the interpreting side, absolutely. And hopefully, you'll see some of these things come full circle. It really has changed from being pretty much on site to do interpreting to being all online because of the crisis, right, of the pandemic. So interpreters who didn't love technology before the pandemic certainly must have learned to use it and to at least live with it during this pandemic. Otherwise, there was very little
And we
interpreting
just have
work.
one quick question. How
Sure.
do you spell the machine translation program that you first mentioned?
Oh, sure. It's deep L, DEEP, like the opposite of shallow, and then the letter L, deep L. It's not a great word, but some call it DeepL, but it's deep L. So DEEP and then a capital letter L. Great question.
Thank
Yes, of
you.
course, questions welcome anytime, and Jennifer's gonna moderate them for me. Thank you for doing all the hard work. So before I tell you a little bit more about myself, I just want to show you this number here. If we were in the same room together, maybe you'd gasp a little bit and you'd go, oh, 47 billion. That's a lot of money. And it is. And remember, this is a global number. This is a global annual number from a couple years ago about the size of the industry or the market or the profession, whatever you want to call it. This includes everything from software translations to localization to diplomatic interpreting to interpreting at the United Nations to military interpreting to translation of software from Apple into Greek, everything. It's a big market and it's still growing even in the pandemic, according to the latest data. And this is from the Common Sense Advisory, by the way. So if you're not familiar with CSA, I highly recommend you follow them on Twitter. You read some of their studies that come out about the industry. Most of it is not free, but what is free is very high quality. I also recommend a website called Slator, which is short for translator. Slator, Slator, Slator. And maybe if Jennifer could put that in the chat, that would be great. Slater, a great newsletter, free information about what's happening in the sector. So my point here is that you may ask yourself, what's the point? Well, the point is that there's a lot of work available. There is enough work for all of us. We're all in this together. This is a big, big industry. And just because your friend doesn't get the project that she wants, or maybe you wanted the project, doesn't mean that there won't be other work. So it's important to remember that the pie certainly is big enough for all of us. Now, just very quickly about me, in addition to what Jennifer mentioned earlier, as she said, I run twin translations with my twin sister and business partner, Daggy, or Dagmar. She's here on the left. I am in Las Vegas, Nevada, which I know sounds to many like a little bit of a joke. Vegas, people live in Vegas. They do. And she lives in Vienna, Austria. So it's a boutique translation business with many contractors. And it's been an awful lot of fun to run this business, but it's also hard. I'm not here to tell you that running a small business is easy. It certainly is not. In terms of my funny accent, I was born in Austria, close to Vienna, and I grew up in Mexico City because of my dad's job, which is an amazing opportunity to spend a childhood in Mexico City. And then I came here to the United States as a teenager for college. So that was like 10 years ago. No, it was like more than 20 years ago. I don't know where time went. And I'm super active in the industry. I think it's really important that we give back to this profession that's given us all so much. And one of our goals is to leave this profession in better than we found it, which is why I donate a lot of my time and effort to teaching others, to sharing what I know, because I want us all to be successful. So hopefully you can feel the love coming from me to all of you and wanting you to be successful in this wonderful business. Here's a pep talk, or maybe a pet talk. I like dogs. You can probably tell by this image that I'm a dog person. So if you're doubting yourself or you're not sure if you can do it, I'm here to tell you that of course you can. Everybody starts at the same place. I'm no smarter or better than any of you. I started at the beginning, just like many of you, and it's going to be a hard road, but you can certainly do it. And loving languages is, of course, the number one requirement. Being good at languages is one of them, but it takes a lot more than that to be a translator. And we could, of course, be here all day talking about it, but I'll just give you a few of the high points because I promised Jennifer sort of an introduction. And then, of course, we'll have lots of time for questions. So if you're feeling insecure, I'm here to tell you it's okay to feel insecure. Even those of us who have been in the profession for a long time, like me going on 20 years, we still have some anxiety about certain things at certain times. I still get a little bit of nerves before a big interpreting assignment. I'm a federally certified Spanish court interpreter, which is a small group of us nationwide who have passed the highest certification that exists for court. And it's an honor to be a part of that, but it also means that you go to some very high profile cases where the stakes are very high. And sure, it is a bit scary. I think it's normal to have some sort of nerves. And last year, my interpreting claim to fame was interpreting then presidential candidate Joe Biden, now president elect, into Spanish, and it was a bit scary. And I think you have to honor that. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to have some anxiety, right? You just have to overcome it and find a way to push through. And by the way, the interpreting assignment for Biden went just fine. Now you may ask, Judy, how did you get started? And as I already said, we started at the same place, my twin and I, the beginning. I don't know anybody really who inherits or who inherited a translation business, even though I feel like I know thousands and thousands of translators. I'm pretty sure I don't know one who inherited the business. So you're at the same spot that everybody else started. It certainly helps to have formal education. Between the two of us, we have a variety of degrees in different fields that I've listed here. And when we started, the marketplace was very different. There really was relatively little guidance beyond university studies. And by the way, my sister is the one who focused on translation and interpreting formal studies, and I went to business school instead, getting some business skills for that side of our business. But back then, this was the early days of the internet, really, and there wasn't that much information out there. So you're in a much, much better position now with hundreds of books and blogs and websites and podcasts and YouTube videos. It's just a wealth of information out there for you to get started. So I think this is a good time to start because there's so much more information than there was years ago. So when we first started, because I came out of business school, I didn't really understand the concept of translation agencies. I mean, they certainly serve a purpose and they take part of the money, that part of the revenue, and they send you jobs and keep a part of the money, and then they pay you, right? But I thought, well, why don't we just work with direct clients so there's nobody taking money from the middle? That was my naive thinking back then. Of course, I didn't know anything about the business or the industry, but we just figured we'd try it, and it did actually work, which is surprising. We landed a few direct clients, and it just went from there. And for the translation side, we've never worked with agencies. On the interpreting side, I certainly have. And I'm not here to tell you that translation agencies are bad. I have many great friends who are CEOs of large and very small translation agencies. And some of them are very, very good partners. Just like everything in life, not everybody you work with is going to be great. So now we have hundreds of clients all over the world, both translation and interpreting. I probably have 50 plus contractors with whom I work on a very regular basis. And my database of folks that I have worked with is much, much bigger, in the hundreds. I tend to work with the same people over and over again, those who are excellent translators and interpreters, and those who spend a lot of time honing their craft, honing their skills, who are active in the translation world. Those are things that I work for. I am both a translator and an interpreter, as you now know. Personally, for me, I need both. I need a sort of a balance of those two skills, which are very, very different. So you probably already know this, that translation and interpreting are completely different skills, require different skills, really, different things you need to be good at. So if you equate translation with interpreting, I suggest you do a little bit more research, or I'll just tell you, translators are really good at writing, right? That's it's the written word that matters. It doesn't matter how well you speak the language, it matters how well you write the target language. Interpreting is a different ball game. It's about being quick on your feet. It's about rhetoric. It's about oral ability. It's about doing quick conversions in your mind. And it doesn't matter if your written grammar isn't perfect, right? Because you're not writing, you're speaking, you're interpreting. So completely different things. There are many people who do one or the other. And I would say there's a smaller group who do both. I'm in the smaller group. As I mentioned, I think it's great to give back to the profession. It's lovely to see a younger generation of linguists such as Jennifer, who hasn't been working for decades like I have, but she's already giving back to the profession. She is already volunteering her time as in a key position at NCATA. So I think that's fantastic. I think you all need to think about how you can give back to the profession, even if you don't have a lot of experience. You can do something that doesn't require experience, maybe writing an article for a newsletter. That was my little pitch as a former president of the Nevada chapter of the ATA. So here are a few building blocks for success. Of course, you'll have this recording. You can check that out later. And I don't have all the answers. There is no magic wand. There is no magic formula for success, but here are a few things that I've listed for you. Hard work, relationship building, finding new things, maybe willingness to try new approaches, a little bit of luck. It's the big question, right? How do I become successful at running a business? And there are many ingredients, but they don't always yield the result that you want. But it certainly doesn't hurt to start with these. So just it's hard to really summarize what the skills you need, but I think this is a kind of a good start. And of course, with a caveat that it's by no means an exhaustive list, but you do need some subject matter expertise. You need to know a lot about the subject that you're translating. For example, I'm not a technical translator, so if a translation comes in that's an instruction manual for heavy machinery, I know exactly who that translation should go to for German into English. There's amazing technical translators out there. I'm not one of them. So specialization is key. Top-notch writing skills and translation are key. I teach at the University of California, San Diego, and at UNLV, and I know I have some of my students here, which is lovely. And I tell them, if you want to be a translator, you need to be really good at writing. So if you have any doubt about your writing skills, this is something you need to certainly evaluate, because you're going to be making your living by putting words on the paper or on the screen. If you're going to be a freelance translator or interpreter, which statistically in the US most of us are or will be, then you need to have some business skills. And I know that's intimidating to many, but really it's not magic. It's not rocket science. A little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales. And these are all skills that you can learn. None of these things are skills that you have to be born with necessarily at all. Some people are naturally better at it than others, but I don't want you to think this is so intimidating that you can't possibly do it. You absolutely can do it. You'll make some mistakes along the way, which we certainly have, but try to recover and try not to make the same mistake twice. You need people skills, just like in every job and any profession. Folks will work with you because you're good, but also because they like you. And I hire translators and interpreters every day, and I hire them for all the reasons I told you earlier, but also because I like working with them. I had a translator who was doing some contract work for me in an Asian language who was a great translator, what I heard from the editor, but I just didn't really like her tone. It just wasn't a pleasant interaction. And it was something very simple. She would never start an email with a salutation like, "Dear Judy." She would just write one sentence and not sign it either. And I, if you go back and forth 15 times with an email, it's okay not to say "Dear Judy" every time. But if you start an email conversation, I think it's kind of common courtesy to say "Dear Judy" and say something nice like, "I hope your day's going well," or something similar, simple, right? It's funny what irks people, right? Of course, all clients are different, but I think paying really good attention to how you communicate with clients is an important thing, because again, you're a writer, so you should know how to write a good email. So I don't work with her anymore, not because she's not a great translator, but because it's not a pleasant interaction for me. I just kind of get ticked off when I see that email, and I'm sure she doesn't mean it that way, but that's how it comes across. So you have to think about a lot of these things. And I know there's other people who are much less sensitive to this than I am, but written communication is something you need to put a lot of thought into, because you are being judged by the quality of your writing because you're a translator. If you're an interpreter, not so much, but translation for sure. So spend some time developing relationships. Maybe some of these folks on this webinar today will be your clients, will be your colleagues. Everything you say, everything you attend, every event you go to, every chat box that you type into, people remember you. And I don't mean to say that to scare you, but this is also a golden opportunity now online, that we have so much interaction online, to grow your network, to meet others, and to be a very pleasant, interesting person to interact with, right? To share information with others, etc. I think this is a good time now that we're all spending so much time on the computer. Speaking about the computer, tech skills. Unless you can afford to hire tech support, you're going to have to fix your own tech problems. Is that fun? For most of us, it's probably not, but I worked in-house as a translator for many years as a department manager, and I had a tech team at my disposal of like 30 people. So I'll be honest, I was pretty lazy. I didn't try very hard to fix anything. I just put in a ticket, a tech ticket, and somebody would show up at in my office and within like 5 minutes. But when I went freelance, well, I didn't have that tech department. So, it's a big motivator. If you have to pay somebody, you'll figure out how to do it. So you have to be self-sufficient at some level, right? Nobody's asking you to program Python or C++, but you don't really need any programming skills. You just need pretty high level user skills, advanced office skills, I would say, right? Because that's what's expected in the marketplace today. If you don't have those, you can certainly acquire them. You need to invest in the skills that you don't yet have. Here's some food for thought that I thought I would share. Have a quick look. These are some questions to ask yourself, so you don't have to have the answers now. I like to use a Socratic method of asking these open-ended questions, right? Just to get you thinking a little bit. And I wish I had some questions like that when I first started. I wasn't super strategic really about our business when we started. And I've learned a lot along the way. And that's why I'm sharing this too, so you don't make some of these mistakes of not having a lot of specific direction. Do you want to be a freelancer, or do you want to work in-house? There's many pros and cons to each. Freelance positions is mostly what happens here in the US. There are some in-house positions of both translation and interpreting. For translation, they tend to be more project management positions and agencies, which means you won't be translating. Mostly you'll be doing project management, which isn't for everybody. And there are relatively few of those in-house positions, but of course they guarantee a steady paycheck, benefits, paid vacation. As a freelancer, you don't have any of that. Sometimes I get out of office messages from my clients. They'll say, "Oh, I'm on vacation until like 2 weeks." And I say, "Wow, that's just incredible. Paid vacation. What a concept." I don't have any of that, right? If I don't work, if I don't earn money, I don't have any money, right? So there is no such thing as a paid vacation. You have to have your own fund that you pay yourself into this fund so you can afford to take a vacation. because you only get paid for the time that you work on a client project. There's lots of non-billable hours that you'll have, anything administrative that you do, marketing, development, working on your website, going to networking events, being here today, all that is non-billable. You can't bill it to any client, but you still need to do it. So you need to find a way to figure out how much do you need to work to cover your bills and how much do you want to earn. So there's some risk involved in working for yourself. There's a huge risk. I know many people have never worked for themselves, and I don't think they really truly understand the risk that it is. You will not have a paycheck every 2 weeks or every month. Sometimes you make no money. And in the beginning, it will be hard. So you should have a cushion before you jump in full time into either translation or interpreting or both. Usually recommended is having built 6 months up of living expenses, just so you have some sort of cushion. And do you like risk? Maybe you don't like risk, and that's okay. There is no wrong answers. But if you don't like risk, or if you can't assume that risk because maybe you're the only breadwinner in your family, then you should look into an in-house position, because that is infinitely more stable. And do you have business skills? If you don't have them, how are you going to acquire them? And what personality are you? Do you like working in house with a boss from 9 to 5? Is that something that suits your personality? I did that for a long time, and having done both, I can tell you that I much prefer being my own boss and running my own business. It is much more lucrative, has been for me, and I also enjoy the freedom. But I'm very aware of the pressure and the risk. Now I have 3 slides for you with nuggets of information that I've collected over the years. I also published them on the blog. I'm not going to touch on all of them right now, but you'll have them. I want you to think about them. I want you to think about how you can use this, or what things you're lacking, maybe. Getting a website. Do you have a website? If you don't have a website, I think you need one in 2021. Understand, number 9, that you're not in this alone. There's other people who are here to help you and support you, starting with yours truly. I'm here to support you by giving you this free advice, which I hope you'll take or not take, completely up to you. I think having a positive attitude is very key. Things will be hard, but the more positive you stay, the better it is. And I get it, it's not always possible. I've had some meltdowns myself. And I want you to know that people like me who've been doing this for a long time, who've been successful, we're not perfect. We don't have all the answers. We've made stupid mistakes. We've made ourselves cry in frustration. When I was practicing for an interpreting exam, I kept on breaking so many pencils when I was so frustrated that my twin sister told me I'm not allowed to have pencils on my desk anymore. So just to give you an example, right? There's lots of frustrations. We don't have all the business answers. I'm currently in a payment dispute with a client who owes me thousands of dollars, and I did everything right. I've got the signed contract, and they're still not paying me. So you will run into problems, whether you're a year in, 5 years in, 10 years in, whatever. But having a positive attitude certainly helps, and understanding that you can't influence everything. There's only so many things you have control over. Here are some nuggets of information, part 2. I want to highlight number 13, perhaps. Don't work on a project until the client has confirmed it in writing, preferably on a price quote that you have written where the client can sign. I've heard from so many beginning translators who start on a project, and then the client said, "Oh, wait, I didn't confirm it. I didn't actually want you to do it." So that's very frustrating. It's not the best use of your time. Make sure you get written confirmation from the client. Set realistic goals. Take an honest look at your skills. If you don't have certain skills, how are you going to improve them? They're not going to magically appear. You're not magically going to become a better business person. If you're not good at speaking in public, maybe you need to go to some training, right, for some business, for some speaking skills. There are some great organizations that offer training on how to do public speaking, which can be scary, but it's part of marketing, part of being out there talking about your business involves some public speaking. Toastmasters is the organization that comes to mind that will try to make you a better public speaker, and they usually succeed. Number 19, I think, is important. Feedback. A lot of us are very scared of feedback, but it's a gift. It's a gift to help you improve, and you'll find that you won't get as much feedback as you'd like. The only way to really get better is for somebody more experienced than you to evaluate your work and to give you some honest feedback. And that doesn't happen that often. Your friends probably won't do it because they're afraid of hurting your feelings. Maybe you'll have to hire somebody to give you feedback. And I give that to my students in my classes. I tell them, I know it looks scary when you see all this red, but really what it is a gift. Instead of me telling you it's great, I'll tell you, here it's not that great, and here's why. And I'll tell you if that translation has value on the open market. Is it good enough to sell it to a client, right? So if you do get feedback, take it as a gift, unless it's coming from somebody who's just trying to put you down, and that's of course not nice and not acceptable. Here's a final one. Again, I won't go through all of them, but I wanted to give you as much information as possible before we go over to questions, because I know in the beginning you may not even know where to start. And if I had sort of nuggets of information like these, I think it would have been easier for us in the beginning. Number 21, I think, is important. You'll have unreasonable clients. You'll have colleagues who are not nice to you. You'll run into people who do not nice things. For example, my client who's not paying me, but in spite of everything, I resist the urge to write angry emails, and I try to be reasonable because that's what I want to be known for. Number 26, improve your typing speed. Of course, the faster you are, the more you'll earn. Usually translation is billed by the source word, or sometimes by the target word, or by the line. We have long gone over to billing by the hour, which is not a super popular way of billing work, but I think it's fair for clients and it's fair for translators because you're being compensated for the amount of time that you spend on a translation. And interpreting, of course, is mostly billed either by the hour or by the half day or the full day. 30, the last one, which I think is very key, don't complain publicly about your clients or your colleagues. Don't name them. And of course, you can post, I'm angry because somebody didn't pay me. Sure, right? But don't mention their name, and certainly don't say anything negative about your colleagues. The internet has a long, long memory. So everything you say online will probably be there in one way or another forever, and people will remember. So just keep it positive. If you don't have anything positive to say, I suggest you don't say it, or you say it in private with a friend or a colleague or in a group that you have where you let off steam. I have some of those valued colleagues and friends, and they know if I call them or I jump on a Zoom call with them, it's because I want to complain about something. And they'll hear me out, but I won't do it publicly online, because trust me, nothing good will come out of that. I know because I've often been called on to mediate between colleagues, and it's a very uncomfortable thing for everybody. I think I've done enough talking. It's time for questions. I'd love to hear what questions you have for me. So I'll send this over to Jennifer. Here's my contact information if you want to reach out to me, and I'll stop sharing screen a little bit so I can also have a better look at the chat, or maybe I'll look at the chat as well. Wow, there's a lot of messages.
Yeah. I think we should keep this slide up for a little bit because people were asking about how to connect with you.
Sure.
So I've written down some of the earlier questions. The first one is, how do you develop your marketing skills?
We only have 20 minutes, so this is $1 million question. As Jennifer kindly mentioned earlier, we did write a book about that, The Entrepreneurial Linguist, which is about 200 pages of advice on how to do that. I recommend you read that book, and Corinne McKay's book, How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator. Corinne is the former president of the ATA. Thank you, Jennifer. And a very well-respected, very well-known translator, and very good friend of mine. So between those two books, you got about 400 pages of information. And then I think those two books, I think, will answer about 90% of your questions. And the rest of it is like everything. It's word of mouth, having a good online presence, having a good marketing strategy, which should include going to networking events, going to client side events, not only translation events. Go to where the clients are. Do you have a blog? Do people have a way of finding you? Do you make interesting comments with people online? Are you a member of LinkedIn groups that may be relevant for you where your clients are? etc., etc. This is a really, really long answer, but I think those two books, and I wish it were my book because I sort of feel weird about about promoting your own book, but which is a labor of love, by the way, and it's required reading at many universities around the world. So if you start with those two books, which didn't exist obviously when I started, you'll be in really, really good shape. And I'm very grateful to Corinne McKay for having written that book as well. So that's where I would start. Uh, the title of the other book, please. Yes, it's How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator.
And what is the best way to improve and obtain feedback on your translations? I think you mentioned this before.
Yeah, briefly mentioned it's hard. If you work for an agency, they'll have an editor who has a business interest in correcting as much of your work as possible. If they're honest, they won't do it, but they will have to justify their work and they'll probably edit stuff that shouldn't be edited. The best way is to join a mentoring program, to find their mentor, to find people whose work you admire. Ask them. Obviously, you need to pay them because you have to respect people's time and it's not free. Ask them and say, can we have some sort of arrangement where I send you my translations and you give me feedback? Ideally, you do this with people you don't have to pay, but they'll probably be in your same experience range, so they may or may not have that much useful feedback. So this is something that you may actually have to pay for. So if you don't have a mentor, I've mentored many translators and interpreters throughout the years, and I've done this for them for free through mentoring programs. But if you don't have that, I would recommend finding somebody you admire and asking to have some sort of feedback loop or some sort of arrangement.
Great, thank you. And our next question is about post editing. Do you use machine translation and then edit it for quality control
Do
afterwards?
I use machine translation?
Like
No,
in your business?
no, I don't. Yeah, for some, I do think there is much value in human translation, although some CAT tools have really good machine translation integrations, such as SmartCat, and I don't use Trados. I'm more of a WordFast girl, but no, I don't. I start from scratch. I still think that our brains work better than the machine for many of these cases. We have a lot of translation memories, of course, built up throughout the years for repetitive stuff. We already have it in the translation memory. Yeah, I think machine translation will play a bigger role, but I do think oftentimes I have occasionally looked at the suggestions for machine translation, and sometimes they just aren't that good yet, right? So it is easier for my brain usually to start from scratch than to edit the machine translation. But others have a different attitude, and either way is okay. I think you just have to, if the client asks, I think you have to obviously disclose that you use a hybrid machine translation post editing. I think that's the fair thing to do. And careful with machine translation, if you put any of the text into publicly available translation engines, that violates your confidentiality agreement with the client. So you may want to be careful about that.
Thank you. And so this can switch to a more general question. Would you mind elaborating on the current case involving outstanding payments with clients? I mean, you can change this to like in general, how do you deal with this if that
Yeah, I
makes
mean,
you more comfortable?
there's not much to say except they're signed an agreement. They're still not paying me. That's the gist of the story, and they have leverage over me. They're a big government agency, so they know that if I take them to court, I will probably win because I could take them to small claims court. But the issue is collecting on it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just married to one. So collecting is a different issue. It depends on which jurisdiction you're in, if the client's in the same jurisdiction as you, etc. But in general, to avoid non-payment, the best thing you can do is have a contract, which again you have to enforce. That doesn't always work. And if you have any doubt about that the company or person's ability to pay, you should ask for payment upfront, at least a deposit or full payment. We usually ask for payment upfront for things like birth certificates, personal documents that come from individuals and not from companies. I would say 90% of our work comes from big corporations, but occasionally we get 20 pages of documents for immigration or whatever, and we usually charge that 100% upfront because if that person doesn't pay me, I have relatively little recourse. So that's the best thing you can do. And for agencies, I highly recommend payment practices. I'll actually type it into the box here for you. I'm sure most of you are familiar with payment practices. It's a website. I think it's about $20 a year or something. It's run by Ted Wozniak, the former president of the ATA. I think he's currently, is he? No, he's a former president. Yes. No, he's a current president. They just switched. So he runs this as a service to all of us. You can search translation agencies only. This is only for agencies, and you can check on their payment record. And of course, this database is only as good as all of us who feed it with information. So if you have a negative experience in terms of an agency not paying you, this is where you can report it. You don't have to use your real name. I always use my real name because I feel like that's important. So I have posted about a couple of interpreting agencies on there. But yeah, there's going to be some non-payment in your professional life. I don't know any translator who has always gotten paid throughout their entire career 100%. I don't know anybody or who has been in the business for a certain amount of time. So just be prepared for that to be a reality of business. And it's terrible. It feels very personal and it makes you very angry. It certainly has made me very angry. But it's just, it's not personal. It's business. And no, I don't think these guys will pay me.
Well, that is unfortunate.
Yes.
And our next question is, do you have any comments on specific cat tools?
It depends. I think that's one of those questions where you really have to go in and play with it. Trados is the big player in the market. A lot of agencies will expect you to use Trados. When I started translating, Trados was a terrible piece of software. And I'm happy to say that publicly. I even told the founder of Trados that at a dinner we had in Oslo at a conference a couple of years ago, and he agreed. He has since sold and made quite a bit of money. Trados, SDL Trados has gotten a lot better, and that is a standard for agencies. On a different note, I don't think the agency should be dictating what kind of software you use, because you're not their employee, so why should they be telling you what software to use? As long as you can produce it the format that they want, I don't see how it matters. But that's a different conversation. Play around with it, get some of the free downloads. I like WordFast, I like SmartCat. They all have some limitations. My sister's a huge fan of Deja Vu. I used Deja Vu for a few years, didn't like it as much. I like WordFast, but again, it's very personal. There are free versions, trial versions for most of them. Play around with it, see which layout you like. Some of them I just don't like the layout, and I'm kind of a software person, so if things don't look the way I want them to look, I get frustrated and I move on to the next tool. But investing in a cat tool is an important decision. You need to do it smartly. If you can get a cheap one or a free one for the beginning, like SmartCat, I'd check with that. But of course, it has limited functionalities. Stuff is only free with limited functions. So hopefully that helps.
And are there certain voice exercises that you recommend?
Oh yeah, there's lots of them, and I'll sound really stupid, but there's vocal trainers who are really, really good at this. I'm not a vocal trainer, but you do have to warm up your voice. And there's one, I have a really good book here. It's by Cyril. I don't get his name. I don't think I get his name right. Cyril, what's his name? Cyril, a book on voice. I'll look it up in a second. So there's lots of exercises where you go like ah, e, o, u. You do this tapping against your chest to warm up your vocal cords. There's one where you make sounds like you're a lion, like, and you open your mouth very wide. And it all sounds completely ridiculous. There's lots of people much better at this than I am, but let me assure you, there's lots of great literature out there. I think it's Cyril Flerov. He's an AIK Russian interpreter, and I've got hundreds of books here, so it will take me a while to find it. So if you just Google how to take care of the interpreter's voice, you'll get that book. And Cyril is going to kill me that I can't remember his last name at the moment. Sorry.
Yeah,
I got up at 5.
Let's say it's I know who you're talking about, but I don't know how to spell his last name either.
Is it
because
Flerov? I think
it looks well to me as an American who speaks English, it looks weird.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's a very high level interpreter.
Yeah, he has a lot of good advice. You can probably follow him on Twitter, I think.
Yes, you should. He's brilliant. Don't tell him I didn't know how to spell his last name.
And for independent translators, do you ask for a deposit up front and then collect the rest of the invoice once the job is completed?
I didn't hear the beginning for individual.
For independent translators.
Oh, I pay them.
Okay.
So when I hire a translator, I pay them. They don't pay me. I pay them. So let's say I needed a translation from Arabic into English. I'll give it to Jennifer. She'll tell me how much it costs, and I'll pay her. So I think maybe there was just a little bit of confusion with the terms, or maybe it's just too early for me, which is also part of it. Thank you, Winnie, for rescuing me. Great to see you, Winnie. Yeah,
I'm
I did
embarrassed
get it.
now.
I did get it right. Good. Yeah.
Let's see. What should you do if a client asks you to show off your skills for translation? If they ask you to do a sample translation that's pages long, how do you respond,
Oh,
especially if it's more than 250 words?
oh, it's easy. I'll tell you a secret word. It's called no. No, thank you. It's not free. My answer is happy to do it. Here's my fee schedule. It's not free. My work is not free. You don't go to the restaurant and ask for free sample food. You don't get a free sample haircut. Don't get free sample clothing at the clothing store. You don't get free medical evaluation 15 minutes. No, I mean, people have to pay for your time. We bill for our time. And those of you who've known me or have heard about me and my stance on this, they will know that you have to bill for your time. Let's not get into this habit of giving our time away for free, unless it's for things like nonprofits like NCCAT, that's different. But tell them, it's funny how quickly people will say, oh, well, we didn't think you were going to pay for it. You say, oh, well, you wanted me to work for free? And I don't want to get into this exchange with people because it doesn't add anything. And I already get up to 500 emails a day. So I just usually drop it. I tell people, here's my fee schedule. Alternatively, here's some sample translations. Obviously, translations that your client has agreed for you to share with others or have been anonymized or publicly available. There's lots of my work that's absolutely publicly available and websites. All my interpreting renditions are all over YouTube. So I'm like, here's some links. There you go. When you hire a CPA, you have really no idea if she or he is good, right? You go by reputation and by recommendation. So I think it's good in the beginning to start saying no to things that are unreasonable. Why should you work for free? And also, I went to business school. I studied a lot of economics, and it's important to think about this in terms of risk, right? If the client, and these are only usually agencies who ask for sample translations. I've never had a direct client ask for sample. If they want to hire you to sell your services to their end client, this is a risk that they're going to have to assume. Whether you're good or not, they have to do the due diligence and they have to bear the cost of that. It's completely unfair from an economics perspective for them to pass that risk on to you. So if they have a big project they're bidding on and they don't have anybody to translate into Arabic, well, then they need to spend some money into finding the good people into Arabic. Or they should have spent more time networking and going to conferences and learning who the great people are into Arabic. Because I happen to know who they are because I've spent time on building that side of my business, right? So the short answer is say no, give them some alternatives, and say, if you want me to do this, here's how much it's going to cost you.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't watch your The Power of No presentation yet. I have to because everyone was
Ah,
raving about it. But
oh,
yeah,
thank
that's why
you.
you should go to ATA conferences
That's
because
right.
Judy did present on the power of no.
And just to give you a little bit more information, thank you for bringing that up, Jennifer. My twin sister and I gave a presentation at the ATA annual conference, which was all online last year in October, November. And we've been speaking at the conference for years. And last year we took a risk by what we thought may not be a popular topic, but about saying no to things that are unreasonable. Oftentimes we say yes to things, we don't really want to do it, and then we complain amongst each other. And our advice is, well, let's just say no to the client and offer some alternatives and only do things that actually work for us. And we talked a little bit about why we tend to say yes so much, which is because many things, female oriented, dominated profession, we've been sort of conditioned. But yeah, no is a powerful word, and I've gotten better at saying no. I usually say yes to requests from nonprofits and to donate my time. I'm happy to do it. But for client requests, the other day I had a client who said, oh, can we do a rehearsal for this remote simultaneous interpreting assignment? Can we do a rehearsal the day before? I said, absolutely. Here's the fee schedule. They said, oh no, we were thinking not to pay for it. I said, no, I said, understood. I said, we bill for our time. Then I said, just let me know if you want to proceed or not. And they said, yeah, we do want to proceed. But they were trying to get it for free. And if I'd said yes, I would have just cut myself out of a significant amount of money because they wanted like a 2-hour slot. So I just said no. And I try really hard not to justify myself too much. I just say, thank you for your inquiry. Unfortunately, it's not possible. Please advise what your decision is. You don't owe people an explanation. You're not in kindergarten. Oftentimes we feel that way, right? Like we have to justify it. I want to go outside now because I'm thirsty, whatever. No, I'm like, I'm running a business. You asked me a question. I'm giving you the answer. Maybe you don't like that answer, but you have to decide what works for you. Only say yes to things that won't make you resentful. You're getting into this profession because you love languages, but you have to set some limits and some parameters to make sure that you are happy, that you're in a profession that you can be in for the long run, and that includes saying no. That's my talk about that.
Thank you. And while working on a project, and you find it requires a lot of research and it's very time consuming than you originally thought, is it okay to renegotiate the price after you have agreed on a rate?
Oh, thank you for that question. Looks like it's from Mina. The short answer is absolutely not. You have agreed on what you agreed on. You need to be fair to your client. I believe in billing professional rates, but what you agreed on is what you agreed on. I think it's completely unfair, and this is a risk that you have to bear as a freelancer, right? If you did a bad job at estimating that, that is unfortunately on you, and you will make some of these mistakes that you underestimate the time, which is why it's oftentimes good for beginners to charge only by the word, because that's a very finite number and then you know ahead of time, right? And you can communicate that to the client. You don't have to estimate. When you do it by the hour, you have to estimate. So you have to have some sort of knowledge about how long and how quickly you can do it. So the part of that equation is always looking at the source text before you say yes to anything. So many beginning translators said, oh, I said yes, and then they sent me a document and it wasn't what I thought. I'm like, well, this is easily solved. You absolutely never, ever, ever repeat after me. I will never accept a project before I've seen the source text. If you only take away one thing from this presentation, hopefully it will be that. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I have to take the loss on that. I think it would be unprofessional to go back to the client and say, turns out it was different. If I were the client and you came back to me, I'd be like, well, you should have thought this ahead of time. We've got a written agreement. So that would be my advice. You have to make it fair for the client too, because what you want is repeat customers. You want this customer to come back. So maybe in the short run, because you didn't do your due diligence or you didn't think about it enough, whatever. And I'm not here to be judgy. You have to take the loss, but hopefully that client will come back, and then hopefully you get more work in the future. Next time you'll do a better job at pricing it. And it's okay to make some mistakes. It's okay. It's not always pleasant. It's frustrating, but it's okay. Give yourself the chance to fail and to improve and to not make the same mistake twice if you can.
Yeah, I actually had that done to me. I hired someone to help me translate my website into Arabic, and they came back to me and they're like, "Oh, it took me longer, so I need more money." And things got
And
awkward after that.
and how did that make you feel, Jennifer? What was your first
Uh,
impression?
Angry.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. So, and as I said on one of the nuggets of information, if you don't have clients, you have got nothing. So your job is to keep your clients happy. And I bet Jennifer's not going to go back to that translator
No.
ever, right? And so you have now, and if somebody asks you about that translator, you probably explain what your experience has been, right? Because you're certainly allowed to share that. And clients talk amongst each other all the time. So you have to make sure that you find a way to do this correctly. Yeah.
Oh, and the worst part was another Arabic translator was like, "Yeah, there's a lot of mistakes on your website." So I was like, "Oh, great." So that was even worse. But
Yeah, that's
moving
not
on.
good. No, that's not good. That's not good.
Could you break down where your work comes from a little? How much work do you get coming in through from your website rather than like networking, your connections, or
Mm.
public versus private sector?
I don't really have the data where the customers are coming from unless they tell me, hey, I read your blog, or I saw your website, or I saw you in your YouTube video, or I saw you at a conference, or I saw you at the the lawyers meeting last week. People usually don't give you that data, so it's really hard to compile that data. I do see some of the website traffic. It's good. I see a lot of traffic coming from Twitter, from my Twitter account to the website. But of course, that doesn't mean that people are going to actually hire you just based on that. So hard to tell. But things that I do have knowledge of is I do know we get a ton of recommendations that usually clients will tell us. They're like, hey, I'm contacting you for this big federal case because attorney so-and-so said you're the best one on this. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then I make sure I send a little gift to the person who recommended me. So lots of recommendations, a lot of government recommendations because the federal government, I work with them a lot. A lot of attorneys are recommending us, both translation and interpreting side. So a lot of it will be word of mouth, and a lot of it is colleagues too. We get a lot of work from colleagues who say, hey, I can't take this. This is not my area, but I know the perfect person for it. So yeah, a lot of your clients will also be colleagues.
Great. And we have one last question. Is there a gentle way to interrupt, especially for when you have someone who's talking really fast when you're interpreting for them?
That's also $1 million question here from somebody on an iPhone. Great question, dear future or current colleague. It depends. The answer is it depends on what mode of interpreting you're doing. Are you doing consecutive? Are you doing simultaneous? Are you in a booth? Are you in court? Is this a community interpreting situation? Are you doing liaison interpreting, that you're walking through a factory with an executive from a German car company and the American head of the factory is talking too fast? So it depends. You may have the opportunity to say something, but I would say, as a general rule, for somebody like me who spent thousands of hours in court and then lawsuits that involve hundreds of millions of dollars, in conferences for everything from Joe Biden to the CEO of Daimler, I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've asked somebody to slow down, because most of the time it just isn't a real possibility. But I don't do community interpreting or medical, so in those settings you do have more of an option to intervene. Where I interpret is very, very formal, and I have asked a couple of times that, in court. There was one trial we did in Kentucky last year. There are 6 of us federally certified interpreters, and defense counsel, he was just, yeah, it was like a train hit us, and we tried to keep up with him the best we could, but of course we can't address defense counsel directly, so we have no choice but to get up and say, Your Honor, the interpreter would request that defense counsel perhaps slow down. To which the judge would say, absolutely, defense counsel, slow down. You heard the interpreter. So he's like, so very, very sorry. So for 5 minutes, it would be slower. Then again. So this went on for 2 weeks. And that is pretty much the one of the few times that we've had to do it. And at some point, the judge voluntarily, she was saying, okay, counsel, this is just, I can barely understand you. I don't know how the interpreters will be interpreting this. So once in a while, you'll get a sympathetic judge. But I know this is a very, very long answer, but most of the time you won't be able to interrupt easily. So prepare yourself to interpret at speeds that you may not have been expecting it to be possible. When I started as an interpreter, I didn't think I could interpret somebody at 150 words a minute, let alone what I do now, up to 200. So it is it is possible to interpret very fast speakers, but there's of course a cognitive limit to what your brain can do and convert, especially in simul. If you're in consecutive and you're in a less formal situation, you can of course say, please allow the interpreter to interpret. If you're taking notes and this person has talked for 10 minutes, and consecutive with notes for 10 minutes is a formidable challenge, even for the best interpreters in the world. So it depends a little bit on your situation. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but it has to be a
No
little bit more
problem.
nuanced. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they appreciated you going into detail. I don't think we're upset about a long answer.
Okay.
But thank you so much. Our hour is up, so I don't want to take any more of your time. But thank you so much for talking to us. You had a great presentation, and you were so thorough in all of your answers. I've seen throughout the chat, people are saying thank you, thank you. So we all
good.
really appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm so happy to hear. It's been my pleasure. I want to wish all of you all the success in the world. I hope you are part of this profession, you enjoy it, you grow and you love it, and you become part of the ATA family. And I'm sure I'll see you around either online or in person. Actually, I'm about to go to another conference online, the TERP Summit, which some of you may be attending. So maybe I'll even see you over there. Thank you, Winnie, for the lovely comment about this presentation. Now I'm gonna get all teary-eyed, so maybe I should sign off before I do that. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the week.